Hey, everyone, and welcome to the Doctors of Running podcast, where we, a group of doctors of physical therapy, talk about the art and the science of the things that we're putting on our feet. Today is myself, Matthew Klein, and Dr. Andrea Myers here, and we're going to have a really interesting episode that's kind of like, how would I describe this? There's a lot of changes going on at Doctors of Running right now. There's a lot of evolution. There's some really cool things we're excited to roll out, but there's also a lot of self-reflection going on about how we do things, how to streamline this, and certain points wondering if we're making things more complicated than they need to be and trying to get more simple, straightforward, and going, how do we do this better? And so we'll get to that in a second. But of course, the most exciting things are we're going to talk about shoes first. Before we do that, obviously, one of our sponsors is Rabbit, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that we have on. I, as always, am wearing my High Country short sleeve, which I usually just ran in, but I'm having some issues with a bacterial infection, having a really hard time regulating my body temperature. So I am wearing the Go-To hoodie, which is really comfortable and great to stay warm. It's been great. We really love Rabbit stuff. It's been really awesome. Andrea, what are you wearing?
This is the Easy T Perf Trail. I love their perf material. It's really lightweight and breathable. But this one is actually nice enough looking to just wear casually. So
Nice.
It's almost 90 degrees here and definitely need something cool. So grabbed this.
Sweet. We are at Oregon in the weird period where we're just starting to get some warmer stuff, warm being relative, 70, 80s. And then it drops back down to being in the 40s. And you're like, wow, this is really weird. Do I turn the air conditioning on or not? Yes. So there's a variety of things that you can get. If that's something you're interested in, the discount code for this month is MAYDOCS10. Did I say that right? Mm-hmm. Great. MAYDOCS10, all capital letters. And both of us have debuted their a racing kit now, which has our logo on it from them. And at least Andrea did really well. When I debuted mine, I didn't do so hot because actually it was the beginning of whatever this is. And congratulations, by the way. Had a great race, couple races, right? Or you did the 400.
Just one race, yeah.
Just one race. It did quite well.
Yeah, it went well.
Not bad matching your 400 high school PR.
No, can't complain about that. Yeah. I'm sure it was the rabbit crop that did it. But I've got to say, I'm very picky about race clothing, and I love this new rabbit crop. It's got pockets in the back and on the sides, built-in bra, doesn't restrict your rib cage at all. So I highly recommend it. I've raced in their crops for a few years now, and this is probably the most comfortable fitting that they've made, and it has more pockets. So go check it out.
Yeah, it has absolutely nothing to do with the very specific training that you've been doing, including strength stuff, power, specific.
It was just the shirt. Yeah.
This is totally off topic, but as a overtraining distance runner, it's been very interesting to watch your training and go, whoa, you just did 4 or 5 200s with tons of rest, and you actually walked it. For me, which feels sacrilegious to go walk. Yeah, recovery, even though I know deep down, I'm like, oh man, that's something that's really important, and I need to think about this. So
yes,
this is off topic. What helps, do you think, with the level of maturity required to go, hey, this is how I know to do, or maybe you're not as psychotic as me and you have a better head on your shoulders, but what helps going, hey, this is what I need to do, even if it means less mileage?
Well, one, going from marathon training, which I was doing the past few years, to mid-distance training the past year and a half, your mileage is going to go down. You're not going to be the best, or at least I'm not going to be the best at the 800 if I'm running 60 miles a week. It's too much. So I run about 35 to 40 miles a week with 1 or 2 bike rides thrown in there. But when you see on your speed day workout, walk or standing recoveries, you know that the intensity is going to be very high. So honestly, there's no way I could jog the recoveries that I'm meant to do standing or walking, because we're usually talking about paces, either 800 pace or even faster, sometimes a little faster than 400 pace. So you're not jogging between those reps for sure.
Yeah, that's something I need to come to terms with as something, as you get older, and the 3 kind of time points in your life, and we've talked about this before, 30, 50, and 75 are the 3 time points kind of based on the evidence where we tend to start losing muscle mass, strength, power. And if you really want to get those things back, you have to be very specific. And that means you need enough recovery time. We talk about plyometrics all the time. To do really good plyometrics, you need 2.5, 3 minutes rest between sets if you're actually going at the right intensity. If you're not, that means you're actually not getting the right stimulus. They should be really hard and you shouldn't be able to do more. And so that's kind of a classic, and I do this very badly, a classic error on a lot of endurance athletes' part, that if you want that stimulus, that's how hard you got to work. And so, yeah, you're not going to be able to jog that. So that's, I'm learning from you and going, I need to do that. Although I'm still obsessed with some mileage. I'm desperately holding on to some. And like, I'm at 59 miles this week, and I'm probably going to go run 1 or 2 later just because of the obsessive compulsive nature to get to 60. So,
well,
yeah, it's fine.
You might learn someday, Matt.
Someday I might. Yeah. Anyway, that's our talk on Rabbit and talking about training and all kinds of stuff like that. So again,
well, I will say one thing about that, Matt.
Yeah.
I've been racing in Rabbit shorts again for years because I just like them. They have pockets. They're comfortable. Yeah. The shorts that I run in on a weekly basis are 4 years old, and they're still in perfect condition. That is something,
I've definitely noted. The durability is phenomenal. So again, and this is kind of like the European concept. It's really funny when I talk to my buddies in Europe. They're like, you have to buy clothes how often? I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, and you're going and buying the cheap stuff on eBay? I'm like, why would you not? That's how you get the most stuff for like the cheapest price. And like, why don't you get the really good stuff, buy a few things that last forever? And I'm like, because I'm an American consumer. All right, sorry, don't get that political there. But anyway, so yeah, it's a different way, and it definitely lasts. So that's something just a good note on that. So as always, now let's jump into shoe stuff. And so this is sponsored by Skratch Labs, which again, another code if you're looking for it is, Doctors of Running.
Doctors of Running.
Doctors of Running, lowercase for 10% off, which I have thoroughly exceeded that, and I don't get a code anymore, even though I buy my own stuff too. I had to say they just sent us the watermelon, which I've been complaining. Actually, by the way, the last episode when I found that they were making it, I found it that they were selling it, so I bought 4 containers of this on my own, and then they sent me another one. And I'm like, well, I have more. I might have a new favorite flavor. And Andrea, you said you've tested this before, but and I'm going to get made fun of for being bougie because the cucumber and lime is actually really good. So both seasonal limited flavors that I would have laughed at. I did laugh at people like, you drink like cucumber water? Like, how bougie can you be? Which then I had some of this and I'm like, oh man, this is pretty good.
Yep, it's delicious. Welcome, Matt.
Anyway, it's really good. And it's been great because the other thing is, especially even in Oregon, one of the challenges I run into is that I don't drink enough fluids because I lived in Southern California for 15 years. I'm like, why am I going to drink lots of fluids when I'm in Oregon? It rains. Why not? And then I still get dehydrated. I'm like, oh, because I need to drink more fluids. So Skratch is something I actually drink throughout the day. It really helps me kind of maintain and get a little bit more fluids in me. And again, some of the runs that I'm doing, I tend to sweat a lot, so it's very helpful. So it's something, if that's something you need, they make some pretty good stuff. It tastes pretty good. So, but on to for the info testing section, what are you running in right now?
Well, I was very excited when the shoe showed up because I loved version 1, Puma Magmax Nitro 2. The original version, loved it for easy runs. For a maximal shoe, it's relatively lightweight. I think for men, it's like around 9.5 ounces. So women's, it's probably a little under 9, but has a little bit of bounce. Like you can definitely feel that nitro foam, comfortable upper fit, wide enough toe box. And the way the outsole is shaped and designed just feels really comfortable for midfoot landings. So I've gotten a lot of miles on the original version of Magmax, and I've got a couple short runs on version 2. And I've got to say, I need to do another run in version 1 to compare, but I can't really tell a significant difference between the two versions. I know that version 2 is a little bit lighter, maybe half an ounce. But in terms of the fit, the ride, it feels pretty similar to version 1 for me. But I know that's not quite the experience you have had, right?
Yeah, I just did my first. I've done quite a bit of walking in this one. I haven't got a chance to run in it until this morning. I did my first run. And I will say it is much better. I'm still learning what exactly they changed. But obviously it is lighter and then they're using what looks like more of a knit type upper, which this upper fits me just a lot better than the original. Little bit wider fit, still kind of that lower volume, but it stretches a little better. Version 1 was okay. It wasn't terrible, but it just was like, it's fine. And the other thing that I found, version 1 felt really bulky oddly, and I didn't feel like it was as stable. I don't know if it's because there was a little bit more sole flare, but it just felt like even though there's massive sidewalls that I was getting pushed medially a lot, did not experience that with version 2 today. And granted, I need to get some more miles on it, but for me, it feels like a lot more refined shoe. And yeah, it's really maximal, obviously, but it feels a little more centered, a little better fitting. And so definitely in my mind, an improvement in pretty much every way. The one thing we got to see is durability, because there is now less outsole material. So we'll have to see what happens there, especially because we all know what happens to me when I have something I can like rip off, but we'll find out. So yeah, this may be a whole nother, we may have to do an episode of like between two shoes with us for that shoe, but I'm not hating it, which is great. Yeah. As opposed to the first one, I was like, meh. So yeah, much better. What else you got?
I'm finishing up I know you already reviewed it, but I'm finishing my miles on Saucony Endorphin Elite 3. I think I talked about this shoe on a previous episode, but I hadn't run in it yet. So my hopes for the fit came true. Like this nice squared off wide toe box is so comfortable. It's definitely one of the most comfortable fitting racing uppers I've run in. I don't know if I would say it's like number one, but no fit complaints. This is absolutely a softer racing shoe. I don't always love soft shoes, but this shoe has so much bounce that it really offsets the amount of softness. I've done a ton of intervals like at 10K pace, one workout like around threshold. I like it. It's super hard to control it when cornering at speed. Like I told you guys, it feels like I'm Mario Karting in the shoe. Yeah, that was a great analogy, by the way. Yeah. Whatever direction you're moving, it wants to bounce you in the opposite direction. So if I'm taking like a sharp corner fast, it feels like it wants to bounce me, outward. If I was going to race in it, I would definitely choose a course with very few turns. But I've really liked how it performs, around 10K pace threshold. It wouldn't be my number one racing shoe, but if I had to do a race in it, I wouldn't be sad. But the wildness in turns would definitely prevent me from using it in a longer race. Like, I'm not even sure if I would use this in a half marathon. Definitely not a marathon.
I think you have got to have pretty stable mechanics. And I can tell you as I continue to complain about this, that I learned the hard way as someone with very not great stability that you got to have really stiff, good stability in your ankles to really utilize this well. And I made the mistake of using that shoe on a very hilly, banked road race that just destroyed me. And so I'll tell you from personal experience, that kind of course, not something you're going to want to do at all. But if you have a flat course and it's not banked and you have really good stability and you really want one of the bounciest things out there, it may work for you. It just didn't work for me. It works great for me on a treadmill when I don't have to turn at all. Right. But as soon as I take it off the treadmill, it's something that I struggle with. And that's, just if you want that wild ride, that's totally fine. It's going to match what you want. You just got to be able to control it.
Yep. I've also got to say, like you, I do my whole workout, from home. So I'm not changing shoes in the midst of a workout. So this is certainly not a shoe that's fun to run slow in. If you're supposed to be running slowly on your warm up or cool down, you definitely feel like you're trying to control the shoe a little more than you should.
Yes. I will say if you're going at least at a halfway, like up tempo pace, even while running, like you don't have to be running all out for that shoe to benefit. I do think that recreational runners may actually do a little bit better than that in that shoe compared to other ones, just because it is very soft. And just as long as you can control it, it's great. But if you have any stability needs, it's kind of like the last version. It's bouncier. It's definitely moves better than the second one that I just felt like I mushed into. But you got to be stable to really get the benefit out of that shoe. So I totally agree.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the only version of version 2 I got to test was a men's 9. So it definitely didn't give me like the real feel for version 2. And version 1 was such a different shoe. I enjoyed version 1. Me too. The fit was not perfect for me. I was kind of between sizes in it. So it just wasn't super comfortable on the ball of my foot. But I did like the midsole feel of version 1 because it was significantly firmer than version 2 or 3.
Can I complain for a second?
Of course.
Okay, so Saucony's got all these great foam. They've got Incredilux, they've got Incredirun, all this kind of stuff. What happened to Power Run HG?
I know.
Like, I mean,
I liked it.
To be fair, that is what's used in the Tempest 3, and Bach's going to hate me for bringing this show up because it's not available in the United States. But this is too firm, in my opinion. I think if they use full length Power Run HG with the Tempest 3 would have been better, but the EVA combination just makes it too firm. But yeah, HG I feel like was super. It wasn't soft. It was firm.
Yeah.
But it was really responsive. And a lot of people like version 1. I'm not saying there's anything wrong necessarily with version 3. It's still people are gonna like it. But what happened?
I feel like Saucony is definitely leaning into highly bouncy midsoles right now. You know, you've got Paramount. Plus Paramount Max. I promised myself I would not call it the streaming service. Paramount Max.
To be fair, I did accidentally write that in the review, and I had to delete it, and I realized that right before Bach posted it. I'm like, oh my God. Because Bach hates it if we go edit reviews within the 24 hours as posted. So I was like, I gotta change that. So no judgment.
Yeah, but I mean, Paramount Max was a shoe that I couldn't run a mile in. It was so bouncy. And just in, can't really say how I know this, but it seems like the shoes that Saucony has coming down the pipeline maybe in the same vein of very bouncy, responsive midsoles. So it'll be interesting if Power Run HG is, I would assume it'll still be in the Endorphin Pro and the Endorphin Speed, but who knows? Maybe not.
Is it used in the, I don't remember. I should know this. Is this used in the Endorphin Pro 5? I know they have Power Run PB. Wow, I am really embarrassed. I should know that. So that's something I have to look up. I can't remember if they're still using it in that.
Yeah,
so
that's a good question.
I gotta get checked on that.
Yeah.
Yep. So what else are you testing?
Let's see. I just finished. Well, we just published our review on Hyperion Max 4, which, you and I once again disagree on. Do we?
I don't know.
I think less than we did on the 3.
Definitely less so. I think the problem is that yours was confounded by the fact with the fit.
That's true.
And it's exactly why I went up a half size. Literally everything in Brooks has been fitting me a half size short. And it's really impacted my ability to run on the shoes. The entire line that we're testing right now, I'm in a 10.5. And that has helped. Yeah. It changes probably how I perceive the stiffness and cushioning of the shoe. But I went up. But I don't know how much we actually disagree.
Yeah, actually. Well,
I think we're pretty actually somewhat similar.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
One, I think the main reason for the fit issue is all of their shoes have so much heel collar padding now. It pushes your foot forward. You think about Hyperion 3, it got much more heel collar cushioning than version 2. Obviously, I mean, Hyperion Max 3 had a similar level of cushioning, and you and I had similar fit issues in it. I didn't get Hyperion Elite. Does it have a lot of heel collar cushioning? I'm not sure.
Not nearly. I mean, a decent amount, not nearly as much here. Ironically, the fit, again, pretty flexible. It's something that I actually had a really hard time locking down. It might have been better if they had more. I had a lot of heel slippage in this shoe. So kind of different set of issues.
Yeah. But basically, the Hyperion line, they added so much cushioning and made the uppers so much thicker that I can see why you've been going up a half size. I think even if I went up a half size, I would still find the toe box too narrow, which
I do actually. Even on runs, I have gotten, just with a half size up, have still gotten some blistering from the taper, to be honest.
It's just such a I mean, a lot of listeners know that Hyperion Max 1 is one of my favorite shoes of all times. That shoe fit so comfortably. It could do everything well. And then they've just progressively made it into what it is now, which is a true maximal trainer. But they've also made it much narrower and lower volume. I find that this shoe fits a lot more like the Launch, which that was another shoe I had high hopes for, but I can't wear it because of how narrow and low volume it is. So the shoe, I definitely didn't enjoy running it because of how tight the toe box was. I really couldn't run more than 4 miles in it at a time. Similar to version 3, this medial midsole cutout didn't really bother me that much. Normally they don't bother me, but I notice them and I like them. I didn't really even feel it in this shoe. And I think it's because it's relatively small and this platform is so stiff that having a cutout here doesn't really do much to the ride. And I know that you felt this a lot, right?
And probably the reason for that is I've gone up a half size so that naturally that my MTP joints, my toe joints are going to line up differently with the plate. Right. So in version 3, it didn't bother me as much. I think because I was size 10 and even though I was getting blistering in my toes, I was rolling forward and it wasn't nearly as stiff. Whereas one of the challenges with plated and stiffening agents is that if you have any kind of bias, if the shoe's too stiff, you're going to start to go on the frontal plane instead of the sagittal plane. So I think that's what happens to me because I really noticed it in this shoe. And I did long runs, but man, that it would flare up all the medial structures on my foot. And yeah, so I think if you have lateral stability needs, this shoe is going to be great. Medial, this is not a shoe for you. Especially if you go up a half size to get the a little more not appropriate, but like a better fit. So I was kind of disappointed. I really enjoyed version 3. Version 4 felt mostly like an upper update in a way that kind of pulled things toward where Brooks seems to be going, where things are getting more snug and lower volume.
Yeah.
And so I don't know the reasoning for that. I don't know if their data about the average consumer is that there's more narrow feet and people are liking that better, but it's been kind of consistent throughout the entire lineup. So I don't know.
I actually thought that the one thing they did better with the upper in version 3, the tongue,
the tongue was a one piece. Yeah, it was one piece in version 3.
And the gusset was too long on either side. So no matter what I did, it would fold over on my foot and there was just no way to get the tongue to sit flat on the top of my foot. They really streamlined it in version 4 and I did not have that issue. But that's basically the only thing I liked about this upper.
Yeah. It just felt like oddly, I think for the category where things are, it just felt like the shoe is too heavy. And despite having DNA gold, which has been a favorite, like in version 3 was one of my favorite midsoles. I'm like, this is great. It just feels like it's too heavy to do what it's advertised. Like I couldn't do anything faster than like up tempo, maybe a little tempo efforts. Like intervals was just not pleasant. And that might also be that like for the record, like again, for a lot of the population that use Brooks, maybe it's a more approachable shoe for that speed kind of stuff. I just found I kind of struggle a little bit and it'd be something that I would rather go do something faster in the Ghosts that's not responsive than this being a little overly stiff, but that's just me probably with the fit.
That's so interesting you say that because I think David said he did a track workout in the Ghost the other day.
He tried to, yeah.
Yeah.
It didn't work out well. Yeah.
And for me, the Ghost isn't a shoe I can run in at all because of its high drop. But the idea that the Ghost is a better fast running shoe than the Hyperion Max 4 is just wild. But that's where the shoes are at now.
Right. And so I think it's because the Ghost is so much lighter than it used to be. It's more of it's not a 12, but it's a 10 millimeter drop. It actually feels lower. If you told me it was like 7 to 8, I would totally believe you. And it doesn't have the bounciest foam, but just trying to turn over just feels a lot smoother. And a good example of be careful with plates and stiffening agents because stiffer doesn't necessarily mean better. So it's just an interesting place. I still have hope for the Hyperion Max. I think there's a lot of potential. I think Brooks is trying some things, which is awesome. It's just there's some refinements that I think continue to be made and they're learning things. And so we'll just see what happens.
Right.
Like I'm super excited for the Hyperion Elite 6.
Yeah.
It looks really nice. I have really high hopes, but we'll see what happens this summer. So what else do you have?
You know, that's it for what I'm testing. My track workouts. I'm still trying to get some miles on the Diodora Mezzofondo spike. Yeah. But I've been doing like 400 pace reps a lot recently, and I just can't run that fast in that spike because of the really sharp toe spring. So my go-to right now is the Victory 2 spike. But I've come to realize that I'm kind of in between sizes in that shoe. Last year I ran in a 10 and it was a comfortable fit, but I knew it was just a little too long. Yeah. So for indoor season, at the end of last year, I got a 9.5 and it fit the way I felt a spike should fit, but it made the arch of the left shoe just hit my arch in the wrong place. And it's kind of made me realize that I have this problem in every Nike racing shoe. Like I've always gotten a little bit of arch pain in the Vaporfly, in the Elf Fly, and now the Victory 2. But it was not bad enough where I would stop running in it because I love, how fast I run in those shoes.
Yeah.
But the pain from this size 9.5 Victory 2 spike is enough where I'm like, all right, I've got to find a different spike that's not doing this to me. So I just ordered the On Cloud Spike, their mid-distance one. So that's supposed to be arriving this week. And I can't wait to test it this weekend at the track.
Should be exciting.
Yeah.
So sweet. I actually have...
What are you testing?
I've got 2 or 3. One's an old one that I've kind of gone back to. The other 2 are somewhat new, and I've talked about this, but I've got the Brooks Ghost Max 4, which I've really been enjoying. Again, I had to go a half size up, so I'm a 10.5 in this. The last 2 versions of Het felt slightly short where my toes were hitting the end of the shoe, even though version 3 wasn't narrow. It was definitely on the kind of wider side. This goes the opposite direction, where even with the half size up, it's definitely more narrow, and I don't particularly enjoy the tapered toe box, but the rest of it, I'm really enjoying. And the Ghost Max, again, whether this is a running shoe is up for debate, but walking, standing, this shoe does a great job. It's definitely got that stable neutral component, the deep footbed, which will take orthotics well if that's something you want. It is really comfortable. It just took a little time for the midsole to break in. Still, I've done a few runs in it, good for like shorter distance stuff, but just not bouncy, not what I'd be hoping for out of a running shoe. But yeah, it's been really awesome walking for long periods and have tons of clinic days and long teaching days in the shoe. It's been great.
So, I forgot about that shoe. Yeah, I've been wearing it to work too.
Yeah.
It's awesome for walking around. Being on your feet, but not for running for me.
Probably not for running. Yeah. No. The other shoe that maybe one of the bigger disappointments of the year, but the Asics Kayano 33 is not what I was hoping. It has gone back to being much firmer. The somewhat bouncy ride of version 32 is not there anymore. They talk about FF Blast Max, which I have yet to experience that like super bouncy, fun, responsive ride in any FF Blast Max that I have put on. And they've gone back with the firmer sole. It's just made the heel clunkier. And what's really weird is, so they've got this design where they've got, a bottom layer, forgetting the name of but it's another firmer foam, bottom layer with a softer top layer. And so it's supposed to use some geometrical things to kind of sit in. You can see things like, hey, the midsole or the outsole this bottom layer comes a little farther on the medial lateral sides of the forefoot. And so actually this thing called fluid support, I can actually feel the forefoot stability in this shoe, which is actually decent. You can see in the heel, there's also a piece that comes up relative to the lateral side that I can definitely feel. It almost feels like I'm sitting in a slightly inverted position in the heel. But then the midfoot doesn't feel supportive. It's like they took out the 40 guidance system that like bounced you out of it really nicely. And honestly, I felt like this is one of the least supportive midfoots in a Kayano that I think I've ever experienced, which has been irritating. Fits much better. It's not as narrow as the previous version, but yeah, this shoe is having a bit of a like identity crisis where they're calling it more natural stability. And I just feel like it's less stable. And it's not been a super fun shoe to run in. It's been great to walk. I've all done, again, like the Ghost Max, I've used this for walking, standing, really comfortable during that. But just the higher impact during running, it's just not been comfortable. And yeah, I just don't know what to make of this. So still in the process of writing the review. I think for walking, it's going to be great, which is most people in the United States use running shoes for walking. So I think that's going to be really successful. From a running perspective, I feel like it takes several steps back. It's also heavier. It's like 0.3 ounce heavier than the previous version. It's a little bit low. And actually, they lowered the stack height slightly. So I would have expected that to drop weight, not increase weight. But yeah, man, it's that shoe and the Nike Structure Plus, which have been major disappointments this year. And ironically, that shoe also works much better for walking than running. David and I have had this similar experience where it's great for walking. Running, that heel transition is so clunky. But luckily, I'm not totally disappointed because we've had some great stability shoes from Saucony. The Omni and the Hurricane have been awesome. I'm going to mess this word. This is the new shoe I can't pronounce correctly. The Gavoida.
Gaviota.
Damn it. Okay. So the Gaviota from Hoka, the 6 has also been awesome. So there are some good things, but just we got to move away from clunky stability shoes. It's 2026.
Right.
Come on.
Yeah.
So my only last one, which I've done a 100-mile review on. I haven't written review on the website yet. I probably should, is the On Cloudmonster 3 Hyper light spray. I've gone back to using this shoe kind of after my rough race. I went back to not using like carbon plated super shoes and I've just been doing all my speed stuff in this. This is such a good shoe. And I have 140 miles on this. This is my left side. That's the wear.
Wow.
So again, it's $280. This is an expensive shoe, but durability and the upper, not losing the fit. I've had zero blistering. I've had no issues with sliding in this. And every time I'm like, it's going to suck because there's no way I can do this without laces. And it's been great. It's something I keep gravitating back towards. And if I have to do any longer races, I'm probably going to grab this because it's one of the few, like, I know it's not plated. It's stiff. It's the closest thing to like a stable racing shoe that we have. It's the lightest one. I just did a video with the 361 Flame 5 and the Hoka Rocket X3. This is lighter than those two.
That's crazy.
So it's just been a really fun shoe. And I think if you have some stability needs and you want a unique upper and a durable shoe, it's been great. And I keep gravitating back to it. And I may actually get to that 200 to 400 mile range that Nathan was challenging me to go, what happens with that upper? So we will see what happens.
I was really bummed that the high medial sidewall in that shoe just didn't work for me because it feels like it fits my foot. Like it does feel like it would stay on, but I'm not running that thing with that high sidewall.
It is insanely high, which is what makes it so incredibly stable for me.
Right.
Although actually I mentioned this in a previous video that like it's one of those shoes where like when I run on a shoe that's too stable, my medial arch will kind of like spasm during runs. And that's definitely what happened the first few runs.
Oh, like, interesting.
Which I thought it was not going to be stable. And then I went, oh.
Yeah.
And then it just broke in. And I'm like, I can do long runs. I can do track work, intervals, long tempos, everything, and not have a problem. And I'm like, I bet Andrea's going to like, this is not going to work for her at all because that sidewall is going to crush her. But there you go.
It's terrible. Isn't it interesting? You know, On has some really interesting shoes right now. And On certainly did not advertise the Cloudmonster 3 Hyper Light Spray as a stability racing shoe or even a stability performance shoe, but that's what it is.
Really? Yeah.
And we've definitely found that with several of their shoes this year that, you know, what On said it was for was not what we specifically found it good at, but they've just made some very different shoes that serve very specific purposes. And if that meets your needs, it's going to be an incredible value. And there aren't other comparable shoes. I think the regular Cloudmonster 3 Hyper is just such a great example of what a super trainer should be. It's light. You can run a variety of paces in it. It fits comfortably. It doesn't feel clunky. It's not unstable. Did anyone on our team dislike it?
There's not a single person that I think dislikes it.
Which is remarkable. So, you know, you're compared.
Because we often, like many people have like hated on, be like, what the hell are you guys doing? And then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, where did this come from? Like, you guys did your homework for sure. I don't know if you intended to do that, but I'm sure they did. But,
of course, but then you compared that shoe to the Hyperion Max 4, which is technically in the same category.
Right.
It's heavier, it's clunkier, the fit is bad. It's just Brooks, in my opinion, has some catching up to do.
I think they definitely have potential. I know, but it's just kind of the way things go. Like I think that's companies kind of shift where they are. Right. I think like Saucony, for example, has definitely suddenly pulled ahead. They're making the bounciest, softest midsoles on the planet, which a couple of years ago was definitely not the case.
No.
And I would have argued going, Saucony, you guys are kind of falling behind a little bit. Like your super shoes kind of aren't like standing out that much. Like, what are you doing? And then now they pulled ahead. And I think companies like, you know, Asics is doing some interesting things, but I think like a lot of their trainers are going, hey, like, what are you guys doing? Your advertising behind the foams is really intense, but what is happening here? So I think, and then look at a company like Mizuno, who they were traditional, and I talk about this all the time. They were traditional for years, and you're like, you guys ever going to come current day? And then I had to eat my words. We're like, you guys are making the most crazy stuff.
For sure.
And also probably, I think comparable with Saucony have some of the bounciest foams out there.
Yes.
And your other companies, your Nike, your, Adidas gets a pass just because they, set sub 2 hour marathon with their new shoe that we're probably never going to get to test, but that's a different story. So I'll just complain about that on air. It's fine. Because I've learned sometimes if I complain, people send things to me. So that's just, I blame them for reinforcing that behavior.
It's like rewarding a toddler for bad behavior.
Yeah, exactly. I think, some of the main companies definitely are kind of changing where they are. Puma is another great example. They've been pretty aggressive they've been consistent. They've been aggressive since the get-go. The Fast R3, the things they're doing, they're holding that, but I'm sure people move around, and so that's just the state of where things are. And the only constant is that it's going to change, and people are going to move differently. So we'll have to see where the catch-up games are, and it may just be also people have different focuses. As a company, their themes are different. So, Brooks, for example, like the Ghost Max 4, I'm sure is going to sell super well. It's so comfortable.
Yeah.
And it's definitely catered to the recreational runner or those who are like standing, walking. That's a lot of who they have to focus because it's, they got to see who they're selling to. So the performance stuff has been interesting. And I think they have a little bit of a ways to go, but I have no doubts because I know the people that are in charge of this have some pretty good stuff behind their name. Figuring things out at a new company is a different story. So curious to see what happens. But I'm pretty sure like they're looking at us going, hey, we finished working on that shoe like 4 years ago. So just wait.
Yeah. So, and Brooks has signed a number of high profile runners and, they assist in moving R&D along too. So I have high hopes for Brooks too.
Yeah. So that of course went longer than we thought, but let's talk about Categorize. Speaking kind of actually in the same vein, let's talk about categorization. Do you want to lead this off? Do you want me to?
So we have decided that we want to streamline our shoe categories and kind of get back to basics. So, in the past, we've called a shoe maximal or a super trainer, but now most shoes fall into the maximal category. And that's not very descriptive of what it's going to be used for.
Right.
You can have a shoe that has a 40 millimeter heel and a 32 millimeter forefoot, and you could be talking about a Vaporfly, a,
Kayano,
super trainer, a Kayano.
Yeah.
It's the Wild West now in terms of shoe stacks. And, I think last year I made a very short list of the shoes that actually have stack heights in the 20s because there just aren't that many left.
Nope.
And this year I can probably cross a couple more off the list because those shoes got an upgrade and now they're in the 30s. So we have decided to just use 4 shoe categories. And it kind of goes back to not the olden times, but, for those of us who were born in the 1900s, there weren't as many shoe categories back then. So the 4 categories that we're going to be using are neutral daily trainer, stability daily trainer, performance trainer, and racing shoe. And we just feel like that's a very clear description of what each shoe is used for. And then we can get into the details of, well, it has this stack height, or it's plated, or it has a super foam or whatever. But it's very clear what the intended use of a particular shoe is from those 4 categories.
And I think one of the challenge, you mentioned this earlier, is going, we used to say maximal, but now literally everything is sitting in that category. Like, people get all upset going, it has to be 40 millimeters to be race legal. But even some of the normal, like the Hoka Bondi or the Clifton are sitting above 40 millimeter. What's another shoe? Like a good example of a daily trainer, like the Hurricane actually from Saucony, I think is sitting over 40 millimeters. And those are daily trainers. Those are shoes that lots of people use for marathons, things like that technically are now illegal. It doesn't really matter. For those of us, the majority of us, like you're a recreational runner, that's not something you have to worry about. But at the end of the day, everything basically is becoming that category. Like you said, there aren't that many, shoes with stack heights in the 20s anymore. To be honest, there's probably more shoes with stack heights below that
Right.
Shoes
simply
from,
because Zero has so many different models.
Zero,
Yes.
or even like the some of the Merrell Barefoot series are still around. You have Topo that makes some stuff in that option, Ultra that makes some stuff in that option, but they also don't make like even Topo and Ultra. Like there's nothing in the 20s. Everything else, it's either in the teens or it's in the 30s, 40s, and nothing kind of sits in that realm. So it's going, okay, why are we getting that specific when at the end of the day, there's some better ways to like, is this just a shoe for your normal daily miles? Is this a shoe that has a little bit more versatility being a performance trainer? Or is it a shoe really meant for racing? And part of the problem too is that I think I'm certainly at fault for this, is going, oh, this shoe can do performance. Therefore, a lot of recreational runners can probably use this for a marathon. And then should I be calling this a racing shoe? No, because back in the day, back when you and I were in, while ago, before all this stuff got crazy, people would use performance trainers as their marathon racer. Like there weren't a lot of marathon specific racing shoes. It was just racing flats that the elites would be able to use for a whole marathon. And the rest of us would use performance trainers or a trainer to get through that distance. And now going, things are starting to homogenize a little bit. Did I use that word right?
Yeah.
It's getting so, like you got enough maximal stack height. It's like, okay, well, the basic foundations are starting to get more similar. Like everything's tall or everything's minimal. Either things are meant for daily training, they have a little bit more versatility, or they are purely for racing. And that's kind of where we're getting back. And it goes back to the idea of like, let's try to simplify this. I think because the whole point of Doctors of Running is to help teach people and try to keep things, it's very complex, but we're trying not to gatekeep information. We want to make this more simple. And going back to trying to help ease consumers' understanding of categorization, I think is a really key thing. So do you want to give some examples of how we're kind of working through this?
Well, I think the Hyperion Max is a really good example to talk about. So the stack height in the heel is, I think, 42.
Yeah.
42.36, right?
Yeah.
So I actually don't know what we called it on our review. We probably called it a maximal.
Let's see what
trainer.
What we put there.
This shoe is, in my opinion, a neutral daily trainer. I know you would not call it neutral. You would call it medially biased, but it's certainly not a stability trainer.
We called it maximal plated super trainer.
Okay.
I don't know if you did that or it's probably me that did that, because I feel like you're much better at doing things really straightforward. So that's probably my fault.
Well, but yeah, if somebody hears maximal plated super trainer, what does that mean? It doesn't really, it tells you it has a plate and it tells you it has a high stack height. But what are you supposed to use it for? Are you supposed to race in it? I wouldn't race in this. It's very heavy. I mean, some people will race in this, but for most people, this is going to be a daily trainer. It doesn't have any stability features. In fact, it's going to drive you medially in the midfoot because of the cutout. So in our new categorization, this would just be a neutral daily trainer. And simple. And then you read the review and you understand, okay, how did we experience it? What paces is it best at? What's the stability actually like? But there's no need for our categories to be complex like they have been getting.
And I will say one of the things that we've talked about, and Bach has really mentioned, is that even if we have, like for me, having worked in the running industry, I'm like, my gut is to go, oh, we should at least be calling this a performance trainer. But we're going to be labeling it as it actually functions, not as the company's given us that label. And so if that's something to go, there's a little pace versatility, but in my opinion, it's not that much more versatile. And then a lot of shoes like the Asics Nimbus, I think I would do similar things, if not run a little quicker. And I would still label the Asics Nimbus as a neutral daily trainer.
Right.
Even though it's stable neutral, it's actually probably one of the most stable. Man, I want to argue with Bach now. I'd be like, can we have a stable neutral category, please? Like, can we have a little? This is where the problem. This is where the problem starts.
Now we're going to have 8 categories and shoes that Andrea and Matt vehemently disagree on.
I might still make a plug for stable neutral, because again, the Nimbus is a great example of this, but this is also the rabbit hole. It explains why my categorizations have just gotten out of. I think this is a me problem. It's just me having these super long categorizations, Bach and going, I'm tired of having to edit this like every time, dude. Like, you gotta stop.
But here's a question for you.
Yeah.
So if we have two categories, one is a neutral daily trainer, one is stability daily trainer.
Yep.
That technically could encompass shoes that are stable neutral, right? So
That's
you
fair.
could either
Yeah.
have neutral shoes that don't provide guidance at all.
Mhm.
And then you have shoes that do have guidance features, and those guidance features could be in one or more directions, depending which part of the shoe you're talking about. So in my mind, it actually makes more sense to throw the stable neutral shoes in with the stability trainers.
Oh, interesting.
Because that's how we talk about stability anyway. When we discuss stability, it's not just like, well, this is a Kayano or it's not. We talk about the ways in which it guides motion or it doesn't.
Right.
So if it's a shoe that truly doesn't guide motion, and there are shoes like that,
Yeah.
then that's a neutral shoe.
Right.
But if the shoe has significant guidance features, then I think that would go in a stability category. And I think we just have to be clear when we say stability, we aren't talking about the traditional understanding of stability, which means something that prevents medial motion.
Well, that doesn't really exist because you can't prevent it. You can only
yes,
change the rate. You can
exactly.
You might be able to change a little bit of it, but you can't prevent it.
No, that's true.
So again, that description is something we need to figure out. But so how would you categorize this shoe?
Well, since I haven't actually run in it, I can't really say, but just from the way it feels on my foot when I try walking around in it, it feels like a shoe that's pushing me significantly laterally. So I wouldn't call it a neutral shoe.
I would, but so our major categories, going to clarify, is going to be neutral, stability, performance, and racing.
Okay.
Correct?
Yes.
Right. So would you put this in racing or would you put this in performance?
Based on your description?
Yeah, I don't know. We're trying to figure out what our description is because we do need to be consistent about that.
True. So I think On probably intended it for it to be a performance shoe. But like many performance shoes, some people would race in it.
Yeah.
But it might not be like that brand's top tier racing shoe. It's probably not marketed specifically for racing. So I would put it in the performance category.
Got it. And I think now that I'm kind of dealing with this, I think I would totally agree because we have two categories for trainers. Performance shoes, which kind of catches all. And I think that you did a great job of explaining, like, yeah, if there is a stable component, we'll talk about that in our section, either the stability section or talk about it in our grading at the bottom, which we do a great job of going, hey, in the stability, is this neutral, medially biased, lateral biased, stable, neutral, whatever. And I think that's a better way to provide a lot less confusion to go, okay, here's the basic category. Now, if you want more, read the rest of our review and you can help dive in. But if you just want the basic, like, what's the major category? Cool, you can move on. So, I mean, that makes sense to me. What other options could we do that might throw this for a loop?
Oh, I've got one. Your least favorite shoe, which is the Mizuno Hyperwarp Pro.
Okay.
So Mizuno has a Hyperwarp line. They've got three shoes, the Pro, the Elite, and the Pure. Mizuno says that the Pro is the most stable of the three, when in reality, it is the most medially biased and the one that you could barely run in.
I could barely handle it.
And it is my favorite shoe. I don't know how many miles I have on it. Definitely over 100.
Well, but it's not 100-mile review. Come on.
Yeah, it's not stable neutral. It is a heavily medially biased shoe, which works great for me and terribly for you. So this shoe, even though Mizuno advertises it as a racing shoe, I would categorize it as a performance shoe because they have much lighter racing shoes to choose from. But if we were talking about stability, we would have a discussion about which way it's encouraging motion.
Right.
Yeah.
Which would, again, and so that's the nice part is now instead of having this like 6 different categories in it, you just call it a performance trainer. And then if you want to know what direction it's pushing you, then you can go read the stability section because that will be very clear that it's really pushing you medially for a variety of reasons, including that excessive lateral flare but
right.
it's still a performance trainer performance shoe because that's kind of what it's intended compared to a lot of other things. Like, would you go race in that?
Peanut has decided to make a cameo on the podcast. Yep.
Luckily not jumping off the bed or off of things this time.
That's what she was trying to do. So
got it.
Yeah.
So would you race in that shoe?
If I didn't have any other options, I would.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
Like, I love that shoe, but it's not the lightest. Okay. It's not the bounciest. If I had to choose a Mizuno shoe to race in, it would be the Pure, because the Pure feels a lot like the Pro, except it's lighter and even more responsive, but it's still very medially biased. Yeah. So, and in my mind, that's what a performance shoe is supposed to be. It should be a shoe that you could race in, but it's not the lightest and the best out there. And it should cost a little bit less than a racing shoe and should probably be a little more durable. Right. Yeah.
Let me bring up one that we actually agreed on, surprisingly. What about this one?
Oh, yes. The one that you eventually agreed with me on.
I don't know if I eventually agree. I think we were pretty close. We're like pretty off the bat being like, oh, this is not, I'm collapsing.
Oh, that's the 5.
Yeah.
Oh,
4. No, I do admit you were eventually right. 5, I think we agreed right away. We're like, oh man, like.
Well, really, I didn't get to put enough miles on the 5. There was a question of whether or not I got one with a defective upper, because I really felt, remember if I had mine up here, I would show you, but if you show the back of the heel of yours, so the seam on the back of Matt's heel there, turn it the other way so that, so the heel is facing the camera.
Yep.
So his seam on his heel upper is straight. Well, mine angled inward medially, and it caused a blister on the inside of my Achilles, and it just made me feel like the shoe was pushing my heel inward, which does not work for me. So it was so uncomfortable to run in that I actually contacted Saucony and told them and sent them a photo, and they're like, oh, it looks like you got a defective upper. We will send you another pair, but they didn't. So I don't have enough data of me running in that shoe to say, but the 1 mile on the treadmill that I did run in it was very uncomfortable.
Got it. Okay. This might be a bad example, but the reason I brought this shoe up is, yes, the Pro Series has been a racing shoe because that was Saucony's first super racing shoe. However, what I had heard was that some of the changes made to this shoe were in line with the fact that a lot of people have been using the Pro Series as a trainer, like a performance shoe, and then racing in the Endorphin Elite. And so some of what I'd heard is going, we're going to change this to kind of fit that where it can handle tons of miles. It's not going to be the lightest racer out there. That's not our intention with this. It's, hey, if you want a racing shoe, it's a little bit more durable, can handle training miles. That's where this is kind of like set. It's supposed to be the more stable option, which for me, as the heel breaks in, it gets a little bit back there, but just the way I think the plate was designed, like I am collapsing aggressively off the medial side of the shoe, something I haven't done in the last 2 versions, and it just made it not a shoe I was going to choose for racing. I've still been bringing it out, trying to break it in, get some more miles, see if things changes, but after 50 miles on and off, it hasn't really changed that much. So some people are going to like that. I don't. But I guess I'm like kind of at odds going, is this a racing shoe or is it a performance shoe?
Well, I think what Saucony is doing is interesting. And again, I preface my comments by saying I've only run a mile in that shoe because of the fit issue. But I like that Saucony made that shoe. Isn't it $225?
Yeah, I don't think, let me double check that while you're talking, but I don't think,
I think it's great that there is like a mid-tier racing shoe for people who don't want to drop $300 on like the highest level racing shoes.
It's $240 now.
Oh, okay. All right. So sadly, that is a relatively reasonably priced super shoe these days in 2026. So Saucony says it's designed for racing. If it works for you, you're going to be using it for racing. would actually be surprising to me if somebody used the Pro as a performance trainer and then raced in the Elite. They're such different shoes.
I mean, so that's, again, what, if I remember correctly, had heard directly from Saucony and from many people out there. So,
I mean, I remember David saying he feels like the Endorphin Azura is more of a training version of the Endorphin Elite, simply because of the geometry. But
a version 1, yes. I don't know if current day stuff, but yeah.
So, but if I were to categorize the Endorphin Pro 5, I would still call it a racing shoe.
Got it. How about the Azura? Have you run in that one?
Yeah, it was way too firm for me.
I didn't think it was. I was like, "There's no way that's going to work for you," because there's a lot of lateral bias and yeah.
It just felt like, and I mean, I like firm shoes, but it felt like that shoe had no give, and it did nothing for my mechanics. So
got it. I definitely would put that as a performance shoe only because of its weight. And then having tested it, again, this is really important for us not to do going, what is it at face value? Or is it going, let me actually do a review, put miles on it and go, and I've got like 120 miles on that shoe. I would definitely put that as a performance shoe because it is light enough that I think a lot of people will excel using that as a marathon type shoe, especially if they don't respond well to plates, but actually still want something that's a little stiff, which I'm like, every time I put that shoe on, I'm like, how is this not plated? Which, again, also speaks to the fact that we can call something plated. That doesn't necessarily mean, or something non-plated, it doesn't make it stiff or not. There are other mechanisms that feed into how stiff is this shoe. Like I think you referenced this, why am I blanking? The Super Blast 3, all the Super Blasts are not plated. Yet, these are some of the stiffest shoes, in my opinion, on the market.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not plated, but
there's plenty of examples of a plated shoe that's super flexible or a non-plated shoe that's stiff as a board. So
the Speed 5 is a great example of a shoe that's like surprisingly flexible for having a plate, but it speaks to the fact that plates are completely different and depending on their design will behave very differently.
I think that is one of the most common misconceptions that I hear when dealing with runners is that they think that just the presence of a plate means the shoe is going to have certain characteristics, and it absolutely is not. And, we've talked at length about how the plate is not the secret sauce in super shoes. There was the great study where they tested basically Vaporflies with an intact plate or with a cut plate, and the metrics were the same. So it's not about the plate. It's about the interaction of all of the components of the shoe. And the presence of a plate helps with some aspects of how a shoe performs, but it is not the magical ingredient.
It is definitely the combination of all of them. And I've said this before when I got to work with a company not too long ago where, they were testing some stuff and then very bouncy midsole and testing all these different shoes. And I was like, I really thought the foams were different. And then I realized looking at their faces going, the only thing that's changing is the plate design, huh? They're like, yeah. And I'm like, really emphasized that it's a very complex equation of like the combination of the geometry, the foam, the plate, and like small changes in each one of those can totally change the ride, and it will change it differently for each person. So be careful. And even I might even argue the same thing now for foams. Like things are getting crazy enough that foams are getting kind of crazy, but that's not the only factor. If you don't have that in the right geometry and the right setup, it may not matter, and you may perceive it totally differently. So.
And that doesn't even get into the role of fit. Like we were talking about earlier, if you go up a half a size because the shoe is too narrow in the toe box, well, now it might fit your forefoot better, but now the forefoot rocker might not line up properly with your first MTP. The design of the arch might not line up with your arch anymore, which I think is the issue I have in the Victory too. So you could have the perfect shoe on paper for your mechanics, but if it doesn't fit your foot perfectly, it doesn't matter.
It really doesn't matter. That's very true. Which again goes back to, I think, us realizing this is so complex. Why are we having a billion categories why don't we simplify this down to the major themes and then can talk more about the uniqueness of the shoe within the review rather than just making the category more complicated than it needs to be. Because that just actually eliminates the point of categorization. Then it's just like, well, it's like almost a second name.
Right.
So yeah, it makes total sense. What's another example, like an interesting shoe that might make this a conundrum?
Oh, well, I'm always happy to talk about the original Hyperion Max. So it was a shoe that was supposed to be a maximal shoe. It had Max in its name, but it had a 32 millimeter heel, 24 millimeter forefoot. It was, I think my women's 9.5 was like 6.5 ounces. It was responsive. It was moderately flexible, and I could run anything from a 20-mile easy run in it to 5K pace intervals. So is that a maximal daily trainer? Absolutely not. I would put it in the performance category. And honestly, and I have said this many times, if that shoe existed before super shoes existed, it would have been one of the best marathon racers in the world.
Really? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I definitely agree that I think when you really talk through a lot of this stuff, the like simplification of the categorization makes sense. And then within the categories, there will be subsets that we can just talk about without having to make this stuff complicated. Because I think that's the theme, is that things are getting way too complicated and it's not helping consumers.
No.
It's making things really confusing. And we want to try to simplify this to help people make better decisions. And if you're locked in like decision paralysis, that's not helpful, because oftentimes people in decision paralysis will end up just making a very poor choice based on other factors that are probably not relevant to them. So usually decision making starts by a step-by-step process. If you can start with, okay, what's the general category I'm looking for? That is going to be a good place to start. Then you can work through what are the subsets that you want. So that is one of the many changes that you're going to see coming to the website. Even before we actually debut the website, we're already doing that with our current reviews, and we'll hope it's helpful. But I think one of the big things for those listening and those watching is, can you give us some feedback on this? Because we're having this discussion as those of us who do this a lot, trying to figure out how to optimize this. Do you agree or disagree with this stuff? And I'm really curious to hear consumer developer feedback to go, is this good? Should we not be doing this? Because we're going to move forward with this, but we also value your feedback as people that consume the stuff that we're doing. Want to make sure that this is relevant for you. And that's part of the discussion, is asking, hey, what's going to help best for those that are consuming our content? Because we're not looking to like be the biggest, content engine out there. We're looking to go, how do we make better and more helpful things for the select few that do read, watch, and listen to our stuff. So yeah, hope this is helpful, and hope it's helpful to hear a little bit about our thought process about why we're moving in a certain direction. If you want to know more, you can obviously, the biggest place is if you want to do more of this stuff, we are available on a variety of different media, different places. We release the YouTube video of this every Sunday, and then the audio recording, the podcast, comes out on Wednesday. We are, of course, releasing reviews on the website is still our major thing, which again, as Andrea mentioned, will be going some big changes here. Very short. We're trying to figure out when we're going to debut that, but don't worry, the links and everything will remain the same. We're just going to have to do some updates and shifting things around. So don't panic if some of the links don't work. We're probably still working on it. So that, as of this video, probably still won't be totally ready to debut, but we'll let you know when that happens. And of course, again, we have stuff on YouTube. We're debuting things in a bunch of different areas. So we appreciate that you watch, listen, and read, and we hope it's helpful. And always, if you have any suggestions, let us know. We're looking to try to figure out how to be better for all of you and ourselves, because that's a really important tenet of what we do. As always, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Hope this is helpful, and we will see you next week.